Rosewood Audio presents Murder at Birdland, an audio novel narrated by its author, Mike Steinell. Murder at Birdland is a work of fiction loosely inspired by the lives and experiences of jazz musicians in the late 1940s who performed in and around 52nd Street in New York City. All names, places, and incidents depicted in this novel are products of the author's imagination. Any resemblance to actual persons, living or dead, or to real events is purely coincidental. And now, Episode 5 of Murder at Birdland.
Chapter 8, Uncle Vincent. It took Martin 2 full days to work up the nerve to call Vincent Costello, his uncle. Much of the time he spent rereading parts of People's Book and staring at the fax copy of the Costello family portrait. The photograph unsettled him. In the photo, the family's wealth was obvious. The 2 older boys wore tailored suits. Charles, the father, was dressed like a banker. Sophia, Martin's nana, wore a long gown and pearls. Catherine, the sister, was dressed like a flapper. Anthony wore short pants, a white shirt, and a bow tie. And baby Vincent was dressed in a christening gown. The wealth of the Costello family was on full display, and Martin couldn't help but wonder how many laws had been broken on their road to affluence. The Costello men were a handsome lot, and the similarity of their features was striking. The photographer had caught the infant Vincent in mid-wail, squirming in his mother's arms, his mouth wide open. The image brought back thoughts of the incident at Varenhorst Photography. Martin called Vincent on Thursday. It didn't go well. Vincent was suspicious from the start.
Look, pal, I don't know what your scam is, but I know for a fact I have no nephews or nieces. So if you think you can squeeze some money out of me, buddy, you're barking up the wrong tree. There ain't no money left. I'm on Medicaid, pal, Medicaid.
Then softer and a bit sad, he repeated,
There ain't no money left. My family's all gone. My mom, my father, my sister, my brothers, they're all gone.
There was a long pause.
To tell the truth, I'm not sure why I'm still here. I ain't in the best shape, don't you know?
When Martin mentioned his mother's name and her intimate involvement with Tony, Vincent hesitated.
Sylvia, the nurse?
He repeated the name.
Sylvia? So you're telling me you're Sylvia's son? And Tony's?
They agreed that Martin would visit the next day, but just before hanging up, Vincent asked,
Would you take that test? You know the one with the 3 letters, damn it. Never can remember those letters.
A DNA test? Martin offered.
Yeah, that's it. Well, would you be willing to do that? Take a DNA test?
Martin agreed, and the call ended. St. Andrew's Senior Living is located at 1821 Woodlawn, just off 18th Street in what was once Kansas City's Club District. The area, now restored, is home to the American Jazz Museum and the Negro League's Baseball Museum. As Martin walked up the steps to St. Andrew's, he thought of how alive with music the area had been in the 30s, when on any given night one might have heard Lester Young with the Basie Band at the Reno Club, Ben Webster and Coleman Hawkins in a tenor battle at the Cherry Blossom on 12th, or Big Joe Turner at the Sunset. The thought came and went because his mind was more concerned about how the meeting with his uncle might go. At the entrance, he pressed the button on the intercom and announced himself. Martin Spencer, to see Vincent Costello? When Martin reached Vincent's room, the door was ajar. He started to knock, but a raspy voice interrupted.
Come in. Come on in.
Martin pushed the door open and stood for a minute just inside the room. The room was small and sad. In one corner, a table and a lone chair set in front of the window that looked out into a courtyard. In the other corner was a twin bed flanked by small, matching end tables. Just to the left of the entry was a kitchen, or more accurately, a kitchenette, a sink, a small refrigerator, and a microwave oven. 2 doors likely led to a bathroom and a closet. The room was neat, clean, but bleak. The walls, painted gray, were empty except for a wooden crucifix holding a porcelain Jesus. The bedding was a slightly darker gray. Everything about the room was sad. Vincent sat in a wheelchair at the table, wearing a long-sleeved dress shirt, tan slacks held up by gray suspenders, and brown leather slippers over sockless feet. A crossword puzzle and a pencil were the only items on the table. He studied Martin, then slowly swiveled his wheelchair to face his guest straight on. A tight-lipped smile appeared on his face, which had a 3-day growth of stubble.
I don't think you need to take that test, Mr. Spencer.
He shook his head and said,
Dead ringer.
I'm sorry, Martin asked.
You're a dead ringer from my Uncle Eddie, Edward Costello, my dad's brother.
Vincent chuckled.
Same chin, same nose, same hair. Eddie's been gone, 40 years? Died in Joliet, but anyway, you look exactly like him.
He grew quiet.
So, Mr. Spencer, how'd you track me down?
Charles Peoples. I believe he entered you for a book.
Oh, yeah, the professor from St. Louis.
Vincent closed his eyes for a moment, then opened them and scrunched his face into a sneer.
I didn't like that guy. Mr. Spencer, that book was nothing but a bunch of lies.
He took a breath, his face relaxed, and he almost smiled.
So, if you're Tony and Sylvia's kid, I guess that means you're my nephew, don't it? Guess I should start calling you Martin, huh? And you can call me Uncle Vincent.
Sure, that's fine, of course, Martin stammered. There was something disturbing about Vincent's face. It was a mean face, sad and mean, as if its default setting was some combination of sorrow, anger, and disappointment. Even when he smiled, the sadness and the meanness remained. His voice was similar. It was all gravel and grievance.
So, tell me, Vincent asked, how you come to find out about this, you being Tony's son.
Martin explained about the brown box Sylvia had shown him after Robert's funeral, the photos, the police report, and the letters. Vincent listened, stone-faced. Martin reached into his jacket and placed a copy of the Costello family portrait on the table. Charles Peoples faxed this to me earlier this week. Vincent picked it up, then laughed softly.
I remember this. Might be one of the few photos ever taken of me.
He squinted at the image.
Look at me, bawling my head off.
His face softened for a moment.
Popped in like having cameras around. Didn't want people knowing what his kids looked like. Said we could be targets.
Targets? Martin asked.
Yeah, targets.
Vincent snapped back with a bit of irritation. His face grew sad and mean again. Who would want to target you? Martin asked. Vincent's expression darkened.
Here's the thing. My family was one of the 4 doing business in Kansas City. There was competition. Things could get ugly, and often they did. Threatening the kids was just part of the game sometimes.
He looked back at the photo.
Handsome bunch, though. Except for me, bawling my head off like a fool.
He studied the portrait a moment longer.
Where are the other photos?
What others?
Vincent snapped. The photos your mother showed you, the ones from New York.
I have them in the car."
"Go get 'em,"
Vincent said. His voice was low but sharp.
"Go get 'em now."
When Martin returned with the box, Vincent nodded toward the table.
"Open it."
Martin picked up the Tooties Mayfair folio, took the photo out, and placed it in front of Vincent. Vincent didn't touch it.
"Yeah, I remember your mom. Tony brought her to the restaurant a couple of times."
He glanced up at Martin.
"She's still with us?"
"Very much so. I'll see her next week for Thanksgiving." Vincent nodded.
"You give her my best, okay?"
Then in a half-whisper he said,
"Show me the others."
He leaned back from the table and breathed in quickly as Martin removed the 3 other photos and laid them in a line. Vincent watched Martin as he held each by the edges and placed them carefully on the table.
"You don't like photos, do you, Martin?"
Before Martin could answer, he added,
"Me neither."
The tight-lipped smile returned.
"Ever touch a photo? Put your fingers on it?"
Martin didn't answer. He didn't move his head. He was thinking of what to say, or if he should say anything at all. He pointed to the photo taken outside the 21 Club. "That's you and your brother, isn't it?"
"That's us,"
Vincent said.
"Me and Tony. That's me in the hat. Stupid-looking hat."
He laughed quietly.
"We had supper there the night before."
He closed his eyes.
"The night before they killed him."
Vincent's words gave Martin a jolt, and he jumped in reflexively. "Who? Who's they? Who killed your brother, Vincent?" Vincent had been staring at the photo. He turned his face toward Martin and said 2 words softly.
"Don't know."
Once again he turned back to the photos. There was a bit of silence, then Martin asked, Why were you in New York, Vincent?" Vincent, still staring at the photos, said,
"You ever heard of the name Kefauver? Senator Estes Kefauver?"
Yes, I have." Vincent explained that the Kefauver Committee had been closing in on the Kansas City families. A friendly senator had warned them that the subpoenas were coming. Vincent's father sent Vincent east to bring Tony home before the FBI could get to him.
"Everybody was going to take the 5th, but some thought Tony might talk. I went to get him home for his own good. He wouldn't come, but he swore he wouldn't cooperate."
Martin pointed toward the photo. "So that was the night before? Were you still in New York when your brother was killed?" Vincent shook his head.
"No, I was on the train back. My father met me at the station with the news. I went right back to New York to claim the body. Went to his hotel to get his things, but it was all gone. Room was cleared out."
"Tony's room at the Dunham?" Martin asked.
"How do you know about the Dunham?"
Vincent asked. "In a letter Tony was writing to my mother, he mentioned it. It was included with the photos my mother received shortly after he died." He pointed to the photos on the table. "Who do you think might have sent all this?" Vincent looked at the contents of the brown box and shrugged.
"I don't have a clue, nephew."
"Vincent, who do you think killed my father?" As he said the words, Martin realized for the first time in their conversation he had referred to Tony as his father. Vincent lowered his head, looked over his glasses, and asked,
"Why does that matter? Why does that matter to you, Martin?"
"Well, it's a mystery, isn't it? The police never solved it. It's like an unfinished story." Martin was searching for the words. He swallowed hard. I just would like to know." He swallowed again.
So, Uncle Vincent, who do you think did it?
Martin thought calling him uncle might encourage him to reveal something he might be hiding. Vincent shrugged but did not answer. Martin pressed on. You must have some ideas. Vincent sighed.
Could have been anyone who didn't want him to testify. Maybe another family, maybe the cops. They were thick as thieves. FBI, probably not. But they were watching us. They might have known.
So you think it was, Martin hesitated, a hit?
Vincent chuckled. You've been watching too much TV. They never call it that.
Someone who knew him? Martin pressed. Vincent stared at him.
Quite likely.
The silence stretched until Vincent spoke again, low and gravelly.
You planning on doing something, nephew?
What do you mean? Martin asked. Vincent only grinned, a cold, knowing grin.
Look, Martin, at a certain point it don't do no good thinking about all this. Nephew, what's done is done. Tony's dead a long time. We'll probably never know why or who.
When Martin left, Vincent rolled his wheelchair to the doorway and watched him walk down the hall. He raised both hands to his cheeks and rubbed the stubble. The cuffs of his shirt slipped down, revealing 2 watches, one on each arm. Chapter 9. Good Neighbor Denice. As Martin drove back to Topeka, he tried to sort out what it was that upset him most about his visit with Vincent Costello, Uncle Vincent. And maybe it was the bleakness of the room, Vincent's strange voice, his creepy smile, or his question.
You planning on doing something, nephew?
It was only a week since they had buried Robert, but so much had happened and so much was different that the funeral felt distant. Overnight, Martin had become part of a family he hadn't known existed. It was upsetting and intriguing. The brown box with the checkered top had changed everything. It had rained on and off for most of the week, but now the sky was bright blue. Being a methodical man, Martin began methodically working through the issues that confronted him. He now knew more about the Costello family, the kind of business they ran. He'd confirmed that Vincent had visited Tony in New York and that they had dined at the 21 Club the night before the murder. He'd also uncovered a possible motive for the murder, to stop Anthony Costello from testifying to the Kefauver Committee. Step by step, Martin was piecing it together in his own peculiar way. After all, he was a peculiar man. Still the questions piled up. What's next? What's the next step? Do I try to go back, to loop? Is it even possible? How far? How far back? How far back can I go? Martin had thought about looping back, as Thomas Gaylord might call it, every day for a week. His opinion shifted by the hour. He wasn't sure what the goal should be or what the risks were. At this point, he had only attempted to go to an earlier time, a few minutes in the past. Could I go back further, or farther? Damn, I never have figured that out. There was another issue. He had never tried looping with a photograph that included people. Only a clock, a mantle, a pen, and a piece of paper. He understood that he'd have to stand in the exact or nearly exact spot where the picture had been taken. Then what? Would the photographer and those being photographed see him appear out of nowhere? He needed to experiment. The film and the Fuji camera arrived on Friday while he was still at work. The package was on his doorstep when he got home. He set it on the kitchen island and stared at it for a moment, then opened it carefully. The Fuji was much smaller than the big swinger. He was impressed by its compactness. This will be very helpful, he said softly. Martin cooked his usual Friday meal, ate it quickly, and tried to practice the piano, but he was too excited. He paced, trying to determine what to do next. By 7:30 he had decided. He poured a Dewar's, drank it quickly, then called his next-door neighbor, Denice. He went back to the piano, tried to practice, but his thoughts drifted. He poured another scotch, a double, hoping it would help him sleep. It didn't. He lay awake thinking about the next day and how Denice would help him. Denice, for most people, would be the perfect neighbor. Friendly, willing to help when needed, and always ready to engage in conversation. But Martin found her a bit too friendly, a bit too noisy, and not very interesting. Martin enjoyed his privacy and rarely asked her for help. But tomorrow was different. He needed her. He slept fitfully, waking at 4 from a half-sleep. He fumbled for a pen and paper, scrawled something, and went back to bed. In the morning he read the note aloud, a letter at a time. Dorensingtrees. Dorensingtrees? He shook his head, considering that maybe his advice about journaling dreams wasn't worth much after all. He closed his eyes, trying to remember something from his REM excursion. Only one image remained. Purple shoes. He said it softly. He'd promised to call Denice around 10:30. At 10:15, he took the big swinger to the kitchen, aimed it at the clock above the sink, and winced when the shutter clicked. He stumbled but didn't fall. He extracted the print, removed the membrane, placed it on the counter, and watched it develop. When the image was clear, he looked at the clock above the sink. It read 10:25. He looked at the print and whispered, "This is how I get back." Martin walked to the phone and dialed his neighbor. "Hi, Denice, could you help me with that thing I asked you about last night?" It was agreed that they would meet at 10:30 in front of his house. At 10:30 they stood on the front lawn in the warm sun. It was unseasonably temperate for November. Denice nodded as Martin gave instructions. "So I just need you to take a shot of me standing by the front door." He held the camera up and demonstrated. You look through here and you push that red button on the top." He handed her the camera. "My goodness, Martin, I haven't seen one of these since the 60s. Where did you get it?" It was my father's." "Oh, yes. By the way, Martin, I'm so sorry to hear about his passing." "Thanks, Denice. Now look, I'll go over here and you can. Martin, do you want, what would you call it, a tight shot? Like just your face or from the waist up?" It doesn't really matter, Denice." She looked through the viewfinder. "I'll need to back up a bit to get your whole body." "Denice, it doesn't really matter. Just stand there and take the picture, okay?" Denice narrated as she followed the instructions. "All right, I look through here." She lifted the camera to her face. "That looks good. Then I push this thingy here." She lowered the camera. "Martin, shouldn't you smile? It's better if you're smiling, I think." It doesn't really matter, but fine, how's this?" Martin was impatient. He pasted on a grin. "Martin, that's not much of a smile. Usually people show some teeth." Martin raised his voice. "Denice, take the shot." When she handed the camera to him, it was warm to his touch. He wanted to get inside immediately, but Denice wanted to chat.
So, Martin, how was the memorial for your dad? I assume your brother and sister came? How's your mom doing? You know, when my dad...
Martin interrupted and spoke quickly. It was lovely. The memorial, it was lovely. The camera was hot to the touch. It was beginning to burn his fingers, and Denice was irritating. He pointed toward the door. I need to go in. Denice persisted.
I know my mother.
Martin turned and put his hand on the doorknob. I'm sorry, I really need to go in. As the door closed behind him, he could hear Denice trying to finish.
My mother had a really rough...
She gave up.
Okay, Martin. See you later.
At the kitchen counter, he extracted the photo and waited for it to develop. When the image was clear, he frowned.
Man, that looks so dopey.
He looked at the photo from earlier, the one showing the clock at 10:15. He repeated what he had said.
That is how I get back.
He picked up the new one, the one Denice had taken.
Here we go, he said, and walked out the front door.
Standing in the dormant yellow grass of his lawn, he looked up and down the street. No one was out. Even before he put his fingers on the image, he heard it, a low hum. Not just sound, but vibration. It started at his feet, climbed his legs, gripped his torso. The spasms came next. He tried to relax and just let it happen, but he couldn't. His shoulders rose, his neck grew rigid, and then it all shot out through the top of his head. Silence. When he opened his eyes, he was lying on his back, thankful for the thick thatch of grass and the ground being soft from recent rains. Denice was standing over him. My goodness, Martin, what are... She stopped in mid-sentence and looked back toward the door where another Martin stood. Her head jerked between them, once, twice, 3 times. Then she fainted. The Martin standing at the door gasped. Oh no. He moved toward her quickly, and his foot slipped in a muddy patch next to the sidewalk. It dug a groove into the mud, and he fell to his knees. He caught himself with his hands and got up quickly. There was mud on his pants. He joined the other Martin, who was kneeling over Denice. They glared at each other. You killed her, they said in unison. Me? What do you mean I killed her? Again in unison. Denice was beginning to open her eyes. They looked at her, then at each other. Now they conspired in perfect unison. We'll tell her we're twins. Denice, can you hear us? She opened her eyes, looked at one Martin, then the other, and fainted again. Let's get her inside, her house. They began to laugh nervously at the absurdity of the situation, realizing that somehow their thoughts and words were synced. As they struggled to get Denice to her feet, the Martin with the muddy knees said, Maybe you didn't think this through. What did you think was going to happen? The other Martin shook his head. You? Really? This was your idea, wasn't it? That was me, but now that me is you. Once in Denice's house, they placed her in her recliner. She was still unconscious. They whispered, She'll be okay. We need to loop back, but not both of us. They locked eyes. We're thinking exactly the same thing, aren't we? A grin spread across both faces. If we both loop, there'll be 2 of us from now on. Good thing or bad thing? Without hesitation, they said, Bad thing. Only one should loop. Denice was beginning to come around, and she was mumbling something indiscernible. Oh, no, they said urgently. How do we decide who goes? They smiled. Rock, paper, scissors? They laughed and began counting. 1, 2, 3. The arms came down, and both Martins said rock. Without hesitation, they repeated the count and both said, "Paper." After the third try, which was a unison scissors, they yelled, "Damn it," and moved toward the front door. They walked across the lawn, maintaining an argument that seemed to have only one side. At the sidewalk just in front of the house, the Martin with the muddy knees stopped and put his hand on the other. Look, I started this. I'm going to make the loop." The other Martin protested. "I started the loop?" he asked in a mocking tone. "We are not an I anymore. We started the loop. Look at your knees. You were at the door. I looped." Martin looked at his knees, then pushed the other Martin hard to the ground. It might have been the first physical fight of his life. It surprised him. He felt an absurd urge to apologize to himself as he stared at the other Martin sitting in the same muddy patch from before. The Martin in the mud was stunned as well. He looked at his hands now covered in mud and glared at the man by the door. "Hey, you didn't have to do that." He stood, brushing his hands on his coat, and moved toward the door. But the Martin with the muddy knees was faster. He darted inside and bolted the door behind him. He heard the pounding as he moved to the counter and picked up the photo of the clock at 10:15. He squinted his eyes, anticipating the pain, and placed his fingers on the image. Outside, his own voice shouted, Hey, let me in, let me in." The vibrations came, and when they stopped, he found himself on the floor. He stood, rubbed his head, and looked at the clock. It read 10:15. At 10:20, he picked up the phone and called Denice. "Hi, Denice, this is, Martin. You know that thing I asked you about last night?" There was a pause. "Turns out, I'm not gonna need your help after all. Thanks." He hung up, eyed the front door, went to it, and opened it slowly. The muddy patch by the sidewalk was undisturbed. No footprints, no gouge, no sign anyone had fallen there. He looked down at his knees. They, on the other hand, were still muddy. He looked up and down the street, halfway expecting to see another Martin. There was none. He was relieved. "So," he said softly, "I guess that's what happens. That's what happens if you're in the photo. There will be two of you. That could get really weird." Denice came out of her house, walking toward him. She looked fine. She was smiling. Martin smiled back and muttered under his breath, "Oh no, she wants to chat."
You've been listening to Murder at Birdland, an audio novel. To learn more about the author and the story behind the music, visit murderatbirdland.com or mikesteinell.com.